Hello and welcome to BBA Atheist. Today we have a video by Red Pen Logic and E is reacting to an atheist about a challenge about all-knowing, all-loving God who would create hell. It's kind of a boring topic that have been beat and beat over and over again, and apparently Christians can just understand the basic line of reasoning that is being presented. And it was somehow, even when it's perfectly explained, they will still somehow fucking get it wrong. You see what I mean when you watch this video.
I have a question for Christians that believe in hell and also believe in an all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful God. Jeremiah 1:5 says that before you were in your mother's womb, before you formed, I knew you. So before God forms this human in its mother's womb, does God know if that human is going to go to hell or going to go to heaven? If God doesn't know, then God is not all-knowing. And if that God does know and chooses to create that human anyways, he is intentionally creating humans that will suffer for all of eternity. And that individual does not actually have free will because that God knew ahead of time when he was creating them that they would end up going to hell. And that person did not have a choice in that matter because it was already decided as soon as God formed them in their mother's womb. You cannot have an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving God and hell.
This video lays out a challenge for Christians who believe
She couldn't have done a better job. I'll say that again. She couldn't have done a fucking better job at explaining and laying down how this makes sense. She couldn't have done a better job. I mean, like, she. How do you how do you refute that? I guess Red Pen Logic is going to present how you can refute that line of reasoning that makes actual sense.
in both hell and an all-knowing, all-loving, and all-powerful God. Here's the gist. If an all-knowing God creates people he knows will go to hell, then those people don't have free will. And if they don't have free will, then God is sending them to hell for no fault of their own. Since that is incompatible with a good God, then therefore hell is incompatible with an all-knowing and all-good God. All right, so that's a challenge. Let's pull out the red pen and give our response. At the heart of this challenge is a fundamental error in thinking. More specifically, this challenge has a mistaken understanding of how God's foreknowledge actually works. It assumes God's foreknowledge somehow causes my actions, and if
It didn't. Like I've said, once again, she couldn't have explained this shit better. Eve did not say anything that even could indicate this. She was specific in saying God created and formed the individual, and he has the foreknowledge that the individual will go to hell. He's making someone that he knows will go to hell. It's not just foreknowledge. She was specific in this. She couldn't have explained it better. I,
causes my actions, then I'm not free. But God's foreknowledge doesn't cause what will happen.
we know. We know. We all understand that. That's not what she's saying. And you know this. It's like they designed this video to just make everyone go insane. They just blatantly ignore everything she said. Like, how do you? No.
It reports what will happen. And that is a really important difference. It's not God's knowledge of my future actions that cause my future actions. Rather, it's my actions that ground God's knowledge of future actions. Here's how philosophers put it. While God's foreknowledge is chronologically prior to my actions are actually logically prior to what God foreknows. Maybe an example will help. If I freely choose to eat Fruit Loops for breakfast tomorrow,
No, hold on. That doesn't make any sense. So my actions, which I have not done, is prior to God's foreknowledge. Let me draw that out on paper so I could understand exactly what he's trying to say. It helps me, actually map out what he's saying so I could refute it better if you can say it like that. Or if there's anything to refute, because the entire argument is based on shit. So there's a timeline, and my action in the future, before I even do it, which God has the knowledge of it because my my actions are predetermined by me, but God has the foreknowledge of it. Let's hear that. Let's hear that line of reasoning. I'm confused.
And that is a really important difference. It's not God's knowledge of my future actions that cause my future actions. Rather, it's my actions that ground God's knowledge of future actions. Here's how philosophy
My actions in the future that I've not done grounds God's knowledge of the future. People, it's literally 2 a.m. when I'm making this video. I couldn't sleep. Like, if this makes sense to you, Christian, Muslim, theist in general, atheist, anyone, please put it in a comment. Help me understand how this makes sense. God is able to see foreknowledge of the things that I'm going to do. But the things I'm going to do is what determines what God apparently has the foreknowledge of. But I haven't done them yet. We're going to move on.
philosophers put it. While God's foreknowledge is chronologically prior to my actions are actually logically prior to what God foreknows. Maybe an example will help. If I freely choose to eat Fruit Loops for breakfast tomorrow, then God will have always known that I would choose to eat Fruit Loops for breakfast tomorrow. However, if I freely choose to eat Cheerios for breakfast instead, then it would be the case that God will have always known I would freely choose to eat Cheerios for breakfast tomorrow. Now, how God actually
That doesn't help. That doesn't help. I didn't give us examples and say this analogy will help us understand the topic better, and they just make it worse every single time. Frank Turek does this. Every one of them do this. Every one of these dumb apologetics do this. How do you say you're gonna give us an example that will help us understand things and just confuse us even more? So if you're gonna eat Fruit Loops tomorrow, God knows that. But if you decide to act like you're gonna trick God and you decide to eat something else, God also knows that. How is your action deciding what God knows? Whatever you decide to do every single step of the way, God has a prior knowledge of it. Your action is not determining shit. God just knows it. It's called having the sight of the future. I guess you could say that. But the interesting thing that should have add to the factor is that God also made you knowing exactly what you're going to do. You gotta add those two things together. They're not separate.
knows the future is another question, and your answer will depend on whether you believe God is inside or outside of time, or whether you hold to an A theory or B theory of time, and we'll need to do that in a separate video. But for this response, here's the key takeaway. Just because God knew what you were going to do before you did it doesn't mean you didn't have a choice in the matter. You choose your actions, and when you choose to commit moral crimes, you deserve the consequences for those actions. That's what hell is all about. A just judge punishes people for their moral crimes.
So eternal fire for stealing, eternal fire for stealing people? Is that a moral judge? Again, it's 2 a.m. I'm losing it. So the entire point of this video is to make us all go crazy over the line of logic that doesn't logic. I swear I hate the name of his channel, Red Pen Logic. Just take out the logic part. Like, what are you saying? If God knows what you're going to do, and He made you knowing what you're going to do, are you saying you still have free will? How? Whether you choosing A timeline or B timeline or zero timeline, it doesn't make sense. And here's where I give up on this video. When you think it couldn't get any worse, they just keep coming with new ways to make you suffer. Red pen logic indeed. Here's where I stop. Thank you all for watching this. If you like the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I don't know why I do this to myself. Have a lovely day, people.